Hi everyone, Richard Benjamin from Funtomic. I'm talking to you today about one of our first releases, which is Chicken Boy, and being a postmortem and running with the previous theme of games that are still live and being worked on. I'm going to talk to you about Chicken Boy and what we did when essentially something that's pretty common that happens to a lot of us is our launch didn't go the exact way that we wanted it to go. So let me just introduce Chicken Boy to everyone. So Chicken Boy is it's an action and time based physics game. It's level based with 4 worlds, which is a nice sounding familiar theme for a lot of people. The game itself was released as premium in November last year, and progression typically in the game works how you'd expect it to work in a lot of action based games. As you progress through the game, you obviously upgrade weapons and fruit. So Chicken Boy himself is the character on the left hand side there. He's the slightly overweight but very lovable chicken boy protecting his chicks who are being attacked by hordes of monsters across 4 different worlds, so it's very exciting. It was our second release. Our first release as Funtomic on mobile last year was a puzzler game called Help Me Fly. So I'm going to move on to talking about our launch day. That's our whole company there. That's not the whole team that worked on Chicken Boy. Chicken Boy was about 3 or 4 people depending on the time, and it took around about 1.5 years to work on. We launched in November last year, and as a company we were super excited, and on the day that we launched we saw that we actually got featured in Best New Games by Apple in over 100 countries. A lot of those countries were actually in the top 10, so we were all super excited, and I'm waiting for someone to tell me what it's going to be, but I'll tell you what it was. Low installs due to premium price. Funtomic, just in terms of like a bit of background, we're very strong in web gaming. We have a web gaming product called Kizzy, and we have a lot of recognition and brand recognition, and we thought releasing it as a premium game would be able to replicate that recognition straight away. There was also another good reason why launch day wasn't as fantastic as we hoped for. So we had huge competition. Touch Arcade on the day of our release turned around and said, wow, this might go down as the most epic release day in quite some time. So Oceanhorn, I'm sure people in here have heard of, which actually is a very good premium game that did very well for a premium price. Tilt to Live 2, Epoch 2, so a couple of very highly anticipated sequels. Football Manager 2014, these all came out on the same day that we came out. So unfortunately, unlike the box office with movies, you can't really predict who else is going to come out on the day that you are, unless there's a lot of you know, I guess, knowledge and press. So everyone knew Oceanhorn was coming out that day, so we were kind of going, okay, they're coming out, let's hope that there's a good slot for us. So what happened? In the previous talk, we heard about how, you know, there's a lot of time being spent in developing. I think he said that he'd been working on his game for 1.75 years, and people pour a lot of heart and soul into their games, and then they release them. And this is something I actually read off Gama Sutra last month. People typically spend 3% and under on actually working on their game after they've released it, which, if you think about an investment, is a really poor return. If you've spent 1 year working on something and then you're going to go ahead and spend 9 days working on it afterwards or something like that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And we actually were in danger of falling into this. We were 4 days into the release. We had 4,000 installs into the game, and we were sitting there going, right, what do we do next? We didn't want to fall into this trap, and we actually really believed in Chicken Boy. So we didn't release and forget. We didn't fall into the zombie apps category that happens a lot. So we actually sat there and scratched our heads a little bit and thought, what do we want to do next with the title? Firstly, and most importantly, we felt that there was a lot for us still to learn as a company. We had this whole investment done. To call us an indie isn't an entirely fair and accurate description. You know, we did have budgets for marketing, not massive budgets, but we could do more than a traditional indie would be able to do when they release a game. And we felt firstly there was more to learn, and the market and opportunities were out there. We actually had some really good performance data. So 1 day retention was 35%. We had users playing for over 30 minutes was 73%, and the number over 2 hours was also pretty good. And this is all within the first 4 days we're looking at, so I haven't got 7-day retention here, I haven't got anything else here. And then we had a third of our users passing the second world, which is halfway through the game. So we're sitting there going, you know what, there's actually people who are enjoying this game, and some strong user feedback. There were some really long quotes on reviews. I didn't want to have to bore everyone by putting them on the board, but everyone loved it. People were screaming for new content within a week of the game coming out. So we were like sitting there going, well, we kind of owe it to our loyal group of fans, but as a company we owe it more to ourselves to actually keep pushing this and seeing how it goes forward. So we listened and we took a closer look. What could we do with a game? What can you do with a premium game? There's two choices. You can either switch it to free, or you can try and work on some new features and acquire users very expensively again. And everyone we spoke to kind of gave us the same line: people don't spend money in action games. It was a repetitive point we heard, and we thought, you know, well, they might have a point, but we've actually built the game in a way that it had a shop already in it, and it had ads already included, so we didn't need to update. And we thought, let's not listen to anyone, and we immediately switched the game to free before our feature expired on Apple. So we had a coin pack within the game where people could buy the coin pack, and obviously ads as well, and the ads disappeared when people made a purchase. What happened? We went from 4,000 installs in 4 days to 40,000 installs on day 7 of our feature. And we thought, wow, okay, we got a whole bunch of users, and we've actually got to do some thinking now. So what we tried to do next was actually plan out our long-term view. I've written on here that there's balancing gameplay and creating compelling monetization options. These things actually go hand in hand. Creating the balanced gameplay is actually only really worthwhile if it leads to people spending money in your game. Part of the reason that you're switching to a free version is to get people and to incentivize them to actually pay. So we really had to sit down and plan what we were going to do next. We worked really hard. There's no silver bullet. And this is, you know, when people talk about what happens to games afterwards, they say, right, well, you know, you just tweak these things and do a little bit of this and that, and everything happens magically for you. It's not really the way that it goes, and we realized that there was no silver bullet for us. The first thing we did was we worked on a test, learn, and iterate approach. So we would push hard on a lot of things. We did most of our update and feature updates on Android, and obviously everyone knows that it's a really easy platform to be able to do that, and you don't have to have the waiting period that you have on Apple to do that. And we'd find that we might push things a little bit too hard and we have to scale them back, or we might, you know, not push a difficulty in certain areas of the game, for example, hard enough, and people were just still coasting through the game. We actually had to do something with the money side, and it's really hard to qualify and quantify, saying how am I going to get some monetization targets in here. But when we first switched to our free version, we had an LTV of 2 cents, which is pretty low. And we said, right, well, what's a good target? What's actually something that we can aim for that's not going to just fall into our laps, but we're actually going to feel a sense of accomplishment and success if we reach it? And that's 80 cents. And the good thing about setting that target for us was that it actually allowed us to work towards something rather than saying, oh, cool, new version, and now it's 12 cents, and now it's 28 cents. But it's actually something to predict and measure how well we work on. And I said before, we do a bit of marketing, so we carefully tested our user acquisition campaigns and creatives to drive down CPI. So some of the things that we did in relation to the marketing or on the marketing side was we constantly made sure that we brought a lot of users from Facebook, and we made sure we were targeting the right segments for the people that we needed. We started testing our creatives, and we thought everyone would want to see Chicken Boy's face nice and close up, and we were wrong. And importantly, on banners today, they're still evolving. So we actually found that the Commando Chick, which is a cool feature within the game, he helps out, he actually blasts some of the enemies away from you. People really tested well with this creative, which was totally different to the first creatives we came up. And we're constantly doing that within our marketing team, small targeted budgets, making sure that we're getting the right CTRs and getting the right users that we want to get. The other thing that we did from the marketing side is we used some pretty easily kind of researchable insights around planning what an LTV of a version looks like nice and early on by seeing what early habits happen. So we knew that we had a long onslaught ahead of us, and we knew that we had to really work hard to understand and realize the potential. So talking about balanced gameplay at first. So we had to completely change the way the game worked. A classic premium action game works on a very, very normalized progression curve where people just kind of work their way up to the end of a world and then come back down. If you're trying to monetize in a game, it's just not going to happen because people know that the next level is only going to be incrementally a little bit harder than the previous one. So the first thing that we did is we actually heavily went into analyzing how our players were playing Chicken Boy. This goes to the level of really having a look at when were users failing, why were they failing. We're actually investigating at what point within specific levels they would fail and really trying to understand the pain points. And sometimes we'd actually say, you know what, it's cool to keep this pain point. And sometimes say, wow, we need to completely change the way that works. And this also involved looking at how people would acquire upgrades throughout the game. So in terms of looking at, so fruits are an element. So Chicken Boy uses his bat to bat some fruits away. And in attacking people, and people would acquire the skills too quickly, and then it wouldn't actually help them out further on in the game. So we had to actually change completely how we looked at that, all in design to build a positive free version for the game. So we actually looked at the whole difficulty curve and we had to completely reset it, and it's now got your typical peaks and troughs of where you'd expect them to have. And this also includes things like potential pain points, intentional pain points, where they could act as a really good engagement point, but they'd also act as a really strong monetization point for us. And we started adding some more features to the game. So features around a live system and a save me feature. So in the actual game, there's a bar in the bottom right hand corner where you can see how close you are to the end of every level. And there was such a high frustration point when you could see you were about to lose, your chick was getting stolen, and you were right at the end. And to actually utilize the save me would cost you one life, essentially. It's a really great feature that works, and it actually keeps people really engaged in the game. We also knew that a lot of the upgrades we built, they had to look cool and they had to feel cool. Like if people were, and this isn't necessarily even including ones that you'd actually have to spend on, this is ones that you could upgrade throughout the game. It was a lot of work to make sure that we were doing that well. I think that there's something else that we realized also a few versions in. It's not fair to compare one version in a way around levels to a previous version. So let's say on a version, level 8 was particularly easy and you've changed the progression curve and now it's really hard. It's not fair just to look at level 8 and level 8 in isolation. You have to look at how people now got to level 8 versus how they got there before. So really important to compare apples with apples and make sure that you're looking at how people are playing your game as a whole rather than one specific curve. I want to talk a little bit around our monetization options as well. So being a premium game and making sure people were spending money, we were looking at why are people going to actually spend inside Chicken Boy? What are they going to do? And we realized there were two strong motives to spend. The first was challenge. So we built a really strong and loyal user base who loved the game and would do anything they could to progress through the game. And early on to spend, if they could actually get ahead of the curve a little bit and make the gaming experience easy for them, they'd love to do it. And then there were the second people who wanted the vanity purchases. So in earlier versions of the monetized version of Chicken Boy, we actually had, bat and character upgrades that had, little resemblance to giving you a skill bonus in the game, but they just looked cool and people wanted to show off. So we had a magma bat and we had other fun stuff that they could play. And We actually thought a lot around the monetization side, and as I said before, we built this model out to 80 cents, and every version that we've come up with, we've said, right, okay, the practice that we've got into place now is how many more times multiplier is this going to deliver us on our LTV targets, and actually being smart, so we know whether we've over-delivered or under-delivered in terms of what we wanted in a particular version. And it all goes to the point around how long you actually want to spend working on your game, because if you deliver over targets, then you've got a great incentive to keep going, and if you're consistently not getting there, then you know that you actually need to change your tack. In relation to how we looked at the whole monetization side, our first free version of the game had a shop of about $15 or $20 maximum in it, and if we're looking at the LTV target of 80 cents, we need to convert paying users from a $15 to $20 shop to then, after commission, getting us 80 cents per user. It meant that we were probably going to need a pretty high conversion rate and them to buy everything that was in the shop, and then we still might not have got there. So we actually had to completely redesign the shop, and we've put in, as I said, power bats. So now the bats have got nice cool powers in them. There's some character upgrades. So Chicken Boy as a character progresses through to being the super Chicken Boy you can see there, and then there's the Rooster as well, and the Commando Chick upgrades. So lots of new weapons that you can use in the game. And now the store's value today is up to about $200 you could spend within the game, which is a nice high number, but we need that high number. And we struggled with the point mentally of saying, is it fair for us to make users pay that much money? And there's two things about it. Firstly, people have got to get into the mindset that it's okay for people to spend money in your game. If they're enjoying their experience and they want to spend, they can spend. And then something else that was really important to us is you don't actually have to spend in Chicken Boy to progress. So if you want to grind, you can grind. There's no necessity to actually spend money, and it'll just take you a bit longer, or maybe a lot longer, but still it'll take you longer nonetheless. But it's not inhibited, so there's no paywalls to say if you want to keep going you have to pay. You can actually get through it, which for us was really important. I want to talk a bit about where we are today. So Chicken Boy has now got over 2 million installs. I think it's close to 2.5 million at last count. We actually released a major Android update last week or the week before, and I just want to show you in relation to some of the improvements. The June 2014 numbers are based on the last version, not the current Android version that's out. So we had a nice big improvement on passing 2-hour playtime. So we had 20% of all of our users playing the game for more than 2 hours. Paid conversion's now gone up to 3% from 0.6%, which is really nice, especially when we go back to the hypothesis that people don't spend money in action games. I'll take 3 out of 100 for now, and let's hope we can push it even higher. The LTV is up to 57 cents, so we're almost at our target. And I think, considering it was so Help Me Fly, which I spoke about, our first game was purely a paid game. We switched it to free as well, but it's had the same in-app purchase throughout. We haven't spent a lot of time working on it. I think with this game, with Chicken Boy, there's a lot of positive stuff still coming, and the ARPU has gone up to $14. We're still really data oriented. We need to explain why we're doing things and then measure them afterwards. So the producer for the game goes through a cycle every month now where they explain the changes on the previous version, and we discuss, was this good, was this bad? And even as a team, because it's on Android at the moment, all the changes we're making, they can actually go back and make these changes really quickly if they've pushed too hard. A version we made, I think in May, where we were really trying to test a new progression curve and the monetization options, made it really difficult to go forward without spending any money. So they had to scale it back within 24 hours, and they did. And the big thing that we're actually really excited about actually is we're releasing our first iOS update since switching the game to free in November of last year, next month, so probably in a couple of weeks. And these so it's really important to say, everyone still knows that there's a slight difference between how effective monetization is on Android versus Apple. I don't think the gap is as wide as it was a while ago, but I think there still is a gap, and I think that considering these number improvements, especially on the monetization side, are all based on Android, and I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some exciting changes when the new version is released on Apple next week. So it's all very exciting times, but the message is, the hard work got us there, and you've got to always have that outlook of looking a few months forward to see how it's going to go for you as well, and take each version as it comes. And that's the Chicken Boy. I wouldn't call it post-mortem, it's a mid-mortem. I'll take some questions if there are any.
What are you using for your analytics?
So our analytics is so we've invested quite a lot in analytics. We use Splunk, and we've tailored the Splunk solution exactly to what our needs. So it's not a cheap solution. I do think there are a lot of cheaper solutions out there that are still going to be able to provide a lot of the insights that we've got. But we've got some data scientists back at the office who are just constantly playing with numbers, and they do it on Splunk.
So Richard, you talked a lot about the cost per install and the user acquisition part.
Yep.
How are you guys managing the user retention, getting the users back into the game, and after the first 4 days they've played it and then they've forgotten about it?
Yeah, so I think it wasn't off the last version, it might have been the version before we've started, it's the last version, we've started with some push notifications to bring people back into the game. I think the live system also helped us out in terms of keeping users within the game. There's a mental trigger, and especially with action games inherently in their nature, they're very much I've kind of got a spare 10, 15 minutes to play, and I like to go in there. So we try and tailor the game like that. I think the standard number of lives you get is 5, and you can burn through 5 lives in an action game pretty quickly. So that's something that works for us quite heavily. There's no social media integration or anything like that. It's hard to do that in an action game effectively. But it's more the gaming experience, and the virality level's quite high. So if you actually watch someone play Chicken Boy, the art and the way the game's played, people see it and they're like, I want it, and we get a lot of installs through that manner. Any other questions?
Richard, as you were improving the game and iterating, did you notice that different demographics were suddenly interested in it, or even different regions that were kind of downloading and spending?
It's in relation to demographics. We did a lot of the user acquisition testing through Facebook, so we found that it was falling into the classical action game demographic of males 15 to 40. It wasn't, that was its sweet spot. It didn't change too much. In relation to geographic location, it's a really interesting question that I don't have the answer for now, because essentially we've concentrated all of our user acquisition to test our versions on US Android, and now that we're going to have the big release of the iOS version coming out in a couple of weeks, I think that's when we'd be expecting to see some more global spending on our end, and acquiring users around the world, and then we can see what's going. We've always had a pretty loyal and steady organic install rate, and it's spread in all the usual suspects, as you'd imagine. Yeah.
Could you speak about the UA strategies that you guys have?
The UA strategies. Yeah. So as I said, we don't spend a lot. So we don't have like a budget meeting and say, right, here we're going to spend $150,000 on this version. That'd be nice for all of us. But I think the test around how we actually acquire users is we tried a lot of networks firstly, and found that Facebook was the best for us to use. Just the targeting was unparalleled for us, but we didn't take it as the sole approach. We essentially tried a lot of other user acquisition partners, and we still see value in using others. We don't want to try one only and say, great, these are these guys. I think it's important you diversify. And the spending is steady. So if we were to release a new version or a new update, we'd want to acquire users at a slow and steady rate for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. And we're not talking huge budgets, we're talking manageable budgets, and seeing how it goes. And those guys, their job is to drive down CPI as much as they can, but also get us the highest quality installs. Because moving from premium to free, a quality of a user is much more important than it was when it's premium. In relation to other stuff around the user acquisition side, I think they've got a pretty constant test of creatives constantly. Like, so A/B testing banners as much as you can, seeing what's getting you the right CTRs. You don't need to throw a lot of money at a creative to see if it's working well for you or not, especially if you're sticking to a small number of user acquisition companies you're using. You can see pretty quickly if one's going to have a better CTR or not, and that's what we did. I'd like to say measuring every dollar, but I think that might be from a previous part of my background and not not the gaming side. Any other questions? Great. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and if you have any other questions about the game, I'm around, so we'll talk to you soon.